When we left off in the previous video, we had completed a basic NestJS WebSocket server. But aside from some basic logging, we had really no way to play with it to see that it actually works. In this video, we will build a simple client to send and receive some messages to that server. Before we dive into the code, I just want to show you that this is what we will be building. We'll have just a basic title here, an input, a button, and a list of messages that we receive from the server. So if right now I were to type in, hello, you can see that it actually was added to the list. And over here, we're logging the what we send and what we immediately receive back. I don't really want to build any controllers right now. I want to focus just on WebSocket gateways. So let's serve some static assets. To do that, I'll go and create a static directory in the root level. And then I'm going to need to make some changes to the main TS file. So first, I'm going to import Nest Express application from @NestJS Platform Express. And then I'm going to import join from path. So we're just going to, right after the word create, we're going to put in the Nest Express application. And then we're going to call app.useStaticAssets. And we're going to use join to create the path for that static file we just created, or static directory we just created. Next, we will go and actually add an index.html into that static directory. Just create an HTML basic template, and then let's just add some data in here for testing. And then let's start the Nest application. Let's test this in the browser to ensure it is serving. And there we go. We have testing 1, 2, 3, so we know those static assets are being served. Let's now begin work on that HTML file and start to build up our client. So let's remove this testing, just put title there for now. And then let's add a form, and then an input, and a button. We'll add a p tag, and I'm going to put an unordered list with the list item that we're going to loop through for the messages that we've received. And now I'm going to need to put in a script. Well, I'm going to fix this first. Okay, so now let's put in the script tag. And I'm going to be pulling in Vue. I'm going to use it like a drop-in replacement for jQuery. So even if you don't know Vue, you can probably pick this up, what I'm doing, really quickly. It's a really great thing to learn if you don't know it already. So var app equals the new Vue instance. We're going to give that root div vapp, and everything between those divs will be controlled by this Vue instance. We're going to make a data object and a methods object. Okay, in data, I guess we'll start with the title. And then I'll just use some string interpolation to grab that and throw it in. And then some text for the message text that will be sent. I'm starting out with nothing because we're going to attach that to the input. So vModel mates two-way binding. So I just write vModel and I put in text, which is the name of the variable in the data object. And it's easy as that to enable two-way binding. Next, let's do messages, an array of strings. And what I'll do is I'll loop through those on this list object here. So I'll just put in the v4 message of messages and then do some string interpolation to grab that string out for each one. Let's see, it doesn't look like much right now, but we can see that we have this title, that reactivity is working. We've got an input with a button, and then the list, which is based off of that array of messages. So if you remember, I put the Vue instance into the app, so I can do things like app title to see what it is. I can rename it and see it'll auto update due to that reactivity. I've also got the text. App.text is two-way binded to the input button. So if I just type in something there and pull that back up or change it, you can see that in action. And next is just that list of messages. So if I were to say push an extra message on there, you'll see it auto update. And so all that reactivity is working. Let's get back to the code and let's just make this button, let's make it type submit so that I can just hit enter instead of actually having to click that button every time. And then we'll add a click event listener. We'll just call it send message. And then I'll add that to my methods object. And for now, I'll just push the message into the array instead of actually using WebSockets just for testing. And then we'll clear that text out once that's been done. So now if I actually type something in, and it's not preventing the default behavior. Let me switch over here. If I just put in @click.prevent, then it'll prevent that from happening. Oh, reload. Let's see. Okay, now it's working. Now let's set up the Socket.io client. So I'm going to drop in a script tag. You'll probably notice here that this is being served locally. We'll get into that later, but it's automatically being served. We can disable that or configure the location, but we'll get up to that in a follow-up video. So let's see. Let's make a variable for the socket to be held in, and then on the created hook, which will run when the view instance loads, we'll say this.socket equals IO localhost 3000. And then this.socket own message to client. And then we'll be passed the payload, which is just the message string. And then we'll console log just like a receive message, just for troubleshooting in case we need it. And then we'll call a method receive message that we'll create now. So in our methods object, let's add receive message. Get the message. You know what? I think this really needs to be up here. Okay, and we'll say, let's just push the message into the array. And we'll make the same thing here, but for send, we'll log that as well. Let's fix this up here. This has been bothering me. That, and then this is not lined up. Okay. Yeah, let's add in the socket.emit message to server. So we're going to do that instead of just manually pushing it in. So at this point, we're actually done with the client. So let's just do a quick review of what's going on here. So at the very top, we're going to drop in a script tags for view and for the Socket.io client. When the script starts, it's going to create a new view instance and throw it into a variable called app. We've designated the div with the ID vapp as our area which view will control. We've added some data in for some reactive data and some methods. Now when this actually boots, the created hook will run, at which time we'll create a Socket.io client and we'll stick it on this.socket. And we'll go ahead and add an initial listener that says whenever you receive a message to client, I want you to take that message and then pass it to the receive message method. The receive message, we just log it and then we add it to this messages array. We should see it because this item here loops through and shows one list item message for each message in that array. When we send a message, we just type it here in the input. The input is two-way bound to this text variable in our data object. And whenever we submit it, it runs the send message, which uses our socket reference to emit a message to server, and we pass this .text as the payload. We then just clear out that input. So let's see this in action. So I come over here to the console and then I type in something like testing. We can see that send and receive, right? I can also go over to the network, and you're probably on XHR to start with. Just click on WebSockets and then click here, and you can see the messages that are sent and received over WebSockets. So if I were to type Big Brother is watching, you can see that the message was sent to the server under the message to server event and then replied with a message to client event, and it just basically grabbed that string we sent and turned around and gave it right back to us. Now I do want to show you, if we duplicate this tab, okay, and if I send a message A, we don't see that over here. Now if I type message B here, we don't see it over here. And that's because we are only sending the message back to the client that sent it, right? So if I come and look at my gateway, and let's see, so when we receive a message to server, we're going to turn around and pass that text right back to the client. Now, if I wanted to admit that to everyone, well, an easy way to do that would be bring in the WebSocket server, and let's just say WebSocket server, and we know that's a server, right? And then instead of returning this, we'll just say void for now. Say this.WebSocketServer.emit message to client text. Save that. Reload. Reload. Message A. Now we can see message A here, right? Message B. So now it's going to everyone. So congratulations, at this point you have a basic WebSocket server set up and a client that can communicate with it. I know it may not look like much right now, but it's a solid foundation upon which we can expand to get into some of the configuration and multiple gateways, rooms, namespaces, all that sort of fun stuff. So let's tackle that in the follow-up video.